Hey everyone, and welcome to this video series on VMware. Today we will be talking about the basics of using VMware Workstation. So for those of you who may not know exactly what VMware is, VMware focuses on a wide variety of different products. They're mostly known, or from my case, from my understanding, what I've always known them to be used as is virtual machines, from VMware to VM Player. Now, VM Player is the free edition of VM Workstation. There's some major differences, such as a real big one is going to be VMware Player runs as its own process, unlike VMware Workstation, where we have like all the virtual machines in a nice tree view, and we can also have them in a tabbed view, and we can also make this full screen to where we can actually manage them and we can see them. So it's a much nicer presented workstation. Now, with VMware Workstation, it allows you to create a bunch of virtual machines. If you're coming from maybe a Zen OpenVZ environment looking into VMware, it has a lot of the same characteristics, but at the same time it's also very different. If you're coming from an OpenVZ environment, one of the biggest things you're going to notice is you're not going to be able to do a lot of virtual machine editing on the fly. You used to be able, now in OpenVZ you can edit the memory, the CPU, the specific hardware stats real time on the fly. But with VMware Workstation and VMware in general, you're going to have to power down the machine to make the edits and then boot the machine back up. So that's one of the big differences. So depending on how you do things, you may or may not find VMware to fit your needs. But in this video, we're just going to talk about VMware Workstation and how to use it. So real quickly, we're going to load up an operating system, and we're going to create a new virtual machine. Now, we have three different ways to do this. We can either do it from a disk, and you can select the disk. As you see, we have a Blu-ray drive here. We can also just create and set up the virtual machine and not load an operating system. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and load up an operating system, as you can see here. Now you can use any ISO, and as you can tell, I mean, we keep a lot of ISOs on standby, so we like to keep them ready just in case you might want to use them. You never know when a client might come in. You never know when you want to set up a virtual machine to test something out. So VMware has a lot of options when it comes to that. The other thing that's nice about VMware Workstation is it's automatically going to detect what operating system ISO you have loaded. This will not work all the time. If you download an ISO with a popular operating system, whether it be a Windows, a Red Hat, a CentOS, a Debian, something like that, it's going to automatically recognize it. But if we do one, let's say, I think we can do it with the minimal here. Nope. I'm trying to find one that's not going to detect. Let's see. Net install won't. Here we go. It's not going to recognize it. So what you're going to have to do is it's going to pop this screen up, and you have to select the guest operating system that's closest to that distribution that you're loading. And if it doesn't even match, you can just do an other and just do like complete other. But the idea is it's trying to make your life a lot easier. So if you do an install, it's going to give you the ability to enter username and password. It's going to fill out and manage a lot of the other manual installing stuff. It's trying to make your life a lot easier. But in this case, we're just going to do a little install of Windows 7, as you can see. So we're just going to go ahead and just those zeros in there, use the developer, and we're just going to go ahead and enter a password and get this thing going. And as you can see, it's also asking what type of version of Windows 7 this is. We're just going to use the Home Basic. Okay, and we also can have it log in automatically, so we're just going to do that. Why not? Okay, this is going to be this name. We've named it there. Disk size, depending on the operating system, what you want to use it as, how much you want to do. In this case, we're just going to leave it at 60. On Linux distributions, you can, by default, it's like 20. You could honestly do 10 if you wanted to. It really depends on if it's like a disk intensive virtual machine or not. That depends. We can also do it as a single file, or we can do it as multiple files. Now this depends on how you want to do things. If you're going to do a lot of migrations, such as if you have a lot of VM servers running, around the globe, and you might have clients like we do who want to basically jump from like UK to maybe Florida to Japan, whatever reason. Having multiple files makes it a lot easier to move them from one machine to another than trying to work with like, one massive terabyte file. It's just so much easier to manage remotely and moving with multiple files. But it depends on your situation. There's pros and cons to each way. It just really depends on how you want to administer your systems. Okay, so now we can customize the hardware. Alright, by default, we have it set to 1 GB, 1 processor. Just to speed things up, we're going to go ahead and give this thing a quad. And we'll just leave the memory in 1 gig, that's fine. The virtualization engine, this is going to depend on your processor and hardware specs of your host node. This machine actually does have the Intel VT-X capability, but I do not have it enabled right now. Now to enable it, you have to go directly into the BIOS. You go into the BIOS, you can enable those settings, and you can take use of the virtualization there with the CPU. Now depending on what you want to do, you will need to enable that. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that just yet, but if in fact you're going to want to run like maybe a 64-bit operating system, you're going to need to enable that so you can actually take use of the 64-bit in the guest system. Otherwise it's not going to go. That's going to be one of the major things. So for now we're just going to leave that disabled. Now for the networking. If you want to be able to access this with a physical IP address, we want bridged mode. What this does is it's going to give us an IP on the host machine so we can access it on the network. So it's going to have its own IP address. If you run it in NAT mode, you're going to use the host's IP address. And if you really want to do some crazy networking and do some forwarding and stuff like that, you can do that. But in this case, we want it to basically have an actual IP address that's physical so we can make use of this machine on the network. So we're just going to go ahead and use the bridge mode. We can also remove and add hardware. In most cases, I'll typically remove the floppy drive, the sound, the printer. I don't really use those things. Now if you're running like a virtual machine in the case of like an office and you want to give your employees that capability, you could probably add them, leave them, depends. If you want to add something else, you can add something. But we're just going to leave that like that, and we're just going to go ahead and finish and power the machine on. And this is what I was talking about with the whole virtualizing in the processor. And this means it's actually found a printer and some USB devices we have connected. So we can actually make use of them. So while it's doing that, I'm going to show you how to do that. You can right click on one of the systems and we can there we go, remove all devices. We can enable or disable. We can also modify the settings. And these were the two that it actually found. So we can connect or disconnect. So it's really easy to make use of a lot of the hardware if you plug it directly into the host. Really easy. We also have the capabilities of taking snapshots, and we'll go into this in other videos about working with the snapshots. But we can do that. We can also capture the screen, do a movie. We have the ability to do some managing options, and we can also activate the settings. As I said, we can't change these type of things unless we are in with, unless we disable the system and bring it down. And just to show you how to do that, you can go to power, power off, suspend, reboot, and you're going to have to do a shutdown. You're going to have to shut it down to actually make edits to the hardware, just to say. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and boot this one up. I'm going to go on ahead and power up this one I've already got installed. But as you can see, all you have to do is click one of these. It brings open a brand new tab. And then we can click on power on this virtual machine. So we're going to go ahead and power on this Windows 7 desktop. Since we've already got this. Okay, obviously I did not shut this thing down correctly. And we are going to boot on. And also, as you can see, my mouse is gone. This does not mean your mouse died. It just means it's lost in the mouse hole. By default, Control-Alt releases the mouse in the mouse hole, and your mouse is once again alive and on the host operating system. But if you click inside, it's going to work within the guest operating system. But with the Control-Alt, we can escape. So don't panic if you think your mouse may have died or something. It's fine. You just have to do a Control-Alt to bring the mouse out of the mouse hole, and you can still use it. So that's just the default. You can change that if you feel you want to use something else. But all in all, this is really as easy as it is to run a virtual machine. I also will say, if in fact you're really serious about doing this in a production environment like we do, we run a minimum of a RAID 10 setup with 16 core processors and either 72 or is it 96 gigs of RAM. Something like that. That's like the bare minimum. And the reason I mention that is because you really are going to want to have that speed and that power and the resources if you're going to run a lot of virtual machines on a system. This right here is a lab machine. It's got 16 gigs of RAM and actually it's got 8 cores and 8 threads. So that's what this is running. It's also a single processor, not a two or quad. So it's fine for like doing test environments and some stuff like that. I mean, as you can see, this is kind of slow. That's because we've got this install running on this tab, and then we've also got the desktop on this one. So, and this is also only a RAID 0 machine, so we don't exactly have the performance of like a RAID 10. Also would recommend you do not run a RAID 0, just because it's not a good idea. I'm not going to go into that, but if you're considering to do any of this on a production, I am going to tell you right here, right now, don't skimp. Actually spend the money, get quality hardware. Your clients are going to thank you, especially your employees or whoever you're doing something with. Don't skimp. We have dealt with a lot of disk recovery and nodes that have dealt with a lot of resource issues. It's not fun to deal with. Don't do it. So with all of the VPS nodes and virtual machine containers that we actually do run, we do run with the quality hardware with the minimum specs I've mentioned. So if you guys are looking to buy or rent, let us know, because we can set up host machines, host nodes. And there we go. That was a pretty slow boot up, but that was a selfish ad. So that's really your basic introduction to VMware Workstation. It's a really nice machine. It's not the most cheapest, so keep that in mind when buying a license. It's not going to be cheap. I mean, we're not talking tens of thousands, but we're definitely talking costly. And the reason why VMware is going to cost you so much is because they do have an SLA. They have a very nice service license agreement, and that's basically what you're paying to get. You're paying for that support, you're paying for that uptime, and as a business, that is what you always want to look and get your hands on as an SLA, and that's why a lot of businesses, despite the cost, are going to go with VMware. Because when they're running critical systems and stuff like that, they cannot go down. They can't handle downtime, so they want something that they know is going to have a quality assurance backing. And that's why a lot of businesses are going to go with the VMware Workstation, because it has that SLA that you're pretty much paying for in that license. So I'm just throwing that out there. Okay, so I guess it's really being kind of slow on me here, but that's kind of weird. But anyway, so that's pretty much how it is with installing operating systems. I mean, you can install pretty much anything you want. There's really no limits. I mean, it's really easy. You can also close the tab. Oh, hey, there we go. Okay, let's see if I can remember what password I used on this one. But if we wanted to, let me show you real quick, we can, with this one, close this out, run in the background. If we wanted to bring it back up, hey, look at that, it's still running. So we can close it, put it in the background if we wanted to, or we can shut it off, turn it down, whatever. And here we go. We have a virtual machine running. So that is really all there is to it. With running VMware Workstation, it's really simple, it's really easy. So if you want to use it for like development, testing, or even want to run stuff in production, it's really nice. So stay tuned for the other videos because we got a lot coming in this series, and we're going to be talking a lot about VMware and going a lot more in depth. So thanks for watching. Subscribe with us, follow us. We've got a LinkedIn page, we've got a YouTube page, we've got a Facebook page. We basically have it all, except Instagram. We're not sure if we should get an Instagram and post a bunch of cat photos. We don't know yet. We're still thinking about it. So let us know what you think about that. If we should get an Instagram, post cat photos, computer photos, whatever. So let us know, follow us, stalk us, give us your feedback, and keep enjoying. Have a great day, people.